distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of Make It Plain podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe, like, do all the things. All the support is appreciated. This week we're going to have an interview. It's going to be a little bit different this week. We're doing a collaboration with my friend Erika Brown from the Brokish podcast. Brokish, really, really good podcast that she does with Amber. It's Amber and Erika do a podcast called Broke-ish, all about racism in America, financial issues. Was actually rated one of the top 10 financial education podcasts, which Erika's not going to like me saying because it's really not a financial education podcast. And so much of Erika's work is actually trying to debunk some of the financial literacy machine, I will say. But anyway, check out Brokish podcast. Me and Erika are having this conversation. The whole purpose of it is Erika is a PhD student at the Texas Women's University. She just about a year or two into a PhD program in sociology, and she did the podcast before she became an academic. I've been started doing Make It Plain since being an academic. We're in very different parts of our career, so Erika actually had a whole career before going into university and education. Was a very high, made a lot of money in finance and gave that all up to go and do a PhD in sociology with no money whatsoever, so it's definitely a labor of love. Me, on the other hand, my whole adult life have been working in academia basically, and I always want to leave, always want to leave because of the tensions of trying to be in these institutions. And so the whole conversation that we're having, we're writing a journal article which is about, how do you be, they call it a public sociologist or a public intellectual. I hate the term public intellectual because it suggests that there is somehow an intellectual's work that's not public. And so much of this conversation, we go back and forth about this, is me just saying, well, look, academia, it's a nonsense. We write in ways that nobody can understand. We do things that, it's all in this bubble, and it's just terrible. And all our work should be public, and the fact that it's not is a massive problem. And so we have so many problems being academics in this white space that me and Erika basically talk through the tensions of that, different stages of our career, what we're expecting, etc., etc. And it really is a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it. Erika is a very good friend of mine. Interestingly enough, I think I say in the podcast interview that I actually hate academic conferences. Academic conferences are the most boring thing ever. But I met Erika at a conference. I met most of my good friends at a conference. One of the good things you get out of academic conferences is meeting people. So I actually met Erika last year, I believe, at the Association of Black Sociologists conference in Philadelphia. Yeah, I didn't go this year. It was in Montreal, I believe, and I couldn't get the money to go from my university. Whole other story, etc., etc. Anyway, so that's the podcast interview. This is also going to be featured on Brokish at a later date, but I really want to share this conversation. Erika's work is amazing. She also just got a op-ed published on financial literacy as well in Yes Magazine, so do check out that interview. I should also note, this does come up in the interview, that Erika got some funding from the Jane, I'm going to read this so I don't get it wrong, the Jane Nelson's Institute for Women's Leadership at Texas Women's University, who were kind enough to give her some money, a grant. So that conversation was partly supported by those good white women, as I say. Alright, so thank you to the allies, as always, thank you to the allies. Anyway, so that's the podcast interview we're going to do after the break. Today, the rant of the week. I was actually going to talk about something else. I was going to talk about my son, who is secondary school age, Kehinde, who does help out with the podcast, so helps out with editing. So all the YouTube stuff, Kehinde is the editor, just 11 years old, and putting him to work, as they say. And I was going to talk about this because he's going to school, and oh my god, looking around at schools, it's mad schools. And basically, the whole point of this, and I'm going to do it next week, I'm not going to do it there, but as a teaser for next week's intro, the tagline is, forget the school to prison pipeline, the schools are now just prisons. That's for next week. Not going to do it today. I was going to do it today. It's the new day of school, gone back, have to postpone it, because I took the kids to school, I walked my younger boys to school, came home, had a nap, because you have to get up early for the school run, especially after 6 weeks of not doing the school run. Getting up and doing that school run, any parent out there, I'll tell you that, it's not the one, So I came back, I had a nap, Wake up from my nap, hear the doorbell's ringing, go downstairs. I'm half dressed, run downstairs, assume it's the postman. No, it was not the postman. Who was knocking on my door today? It was West Midlands Police. 3 of them. 3 West Midlands Police. Apparently, only one was actually a police officer. The other 2 were students. And this is the whole nother. When I said this to somebody, they're like, "What do you mean students?" Well, police gets trained, and also police get trained in universities now. We actually have a degree in policing at BCU. No longer have an undergraduate Black Studies degree. Do have a policing degree. I don't know. You make of that what you will. Anyway, I will go into more of the Black Studies stuff for that as we go on. In fact, just a slight aside before I get into this police story. That was this doesn't come up in this interview because it hadn't happened yet when I talked to Erika, but that losing undergraduate degree in Black Studies, one of those things where you think, what am I doing? Why am I in this job? Why am I in this institution? We're trying to do this critical work, but you just can't do it. Anyway, complete aside, was not what I was gonna mention. So anyway, I come downstairs, open the door, 3 police. So I'm like, okay, a bit surprised. I'm still wiping sleep out of my eyes at this point. And I kid you not, they sent a black police officer around to politely, he was very polite, give him his due, to politely invite me for a voluntary interview down at the police station because of a video that I put online a couple of months ago. Now, if you've been following this, a couple of months ago, I did do a video for all about, it's on YouTube. If you go to Make It Plain YouTube channel, you will see it up there. And it's called, "It's Not a Crime to Call a Coconut a Coconut." Now, this is a video I posted about 2 months ago, and this was in response to Marieha Hussain. So Marieha Hussain, a teacher down in London who lost her job, by the way, because she's the one who carried the placard that had a picture of Rishi Sunak and Braverman on there and 2 coconuts, right? So she called 2 coconuts, and because of that, police were searching for her. They put a picture out there on social media. She lost her job. They eventually charged her. And so when it came out that they charged her, I made this video to say, look, don't be ridiculous. This is black political thought. Coconut, coon, all this language, Uncle Tom, House Negro. These are our terms, right? You can go, I ain't going to play that now because, like I said, you can just go on to Make It Plain YouTube channel. You can find that video there, about 20 minutes where I break it down. Say, look, these are our terms. These are not racial slurs. They should not be policed, right? So I made that video, and to be honest, when I made that video, one of the possible outcomes that definitely could happen was the police would knock on my door, right? Because unfortunately in the United Kingdom, we don't have freedom of speech. Especially as black people, we do not have freedom of speech. In America, you got the First Amendment, and the First Amendment protects speech. We don't have that here. So, as a professor, as the first professor, only still professor of Black Studies in Europe, I'm not allowed, apparently, to go out and outline in detail, like a lecture, what are black political thought. House Negro, Coon, Tom, Uncle Tom, what else I do? Uncle Tom, I think sellout was in there. All these terms which I'll use in teaching, terms which, by the way, I've used in books. So if you go Psychosis of Whiteness, whole section with all these terms in it, you're not allowed to go and say that. You can't post it on social media because you're going to get calls from the police. Right? So that's the video that's led to me having now have to have a police interview. So the guy comes to the house anyway. I said, black police officer. Could be a coincidence, but I'll be very, very surprised. Knocks on the door, says, hey, all friendly. Firstly, they wanted to come into my house. I was like, you mad? Don't never have no police in your house. Heavy advice to give you right now. Don't never have no police in your house unless there's a warrant. I don't care what it is they're talking about. Keep the police outside your house. Right? They were on my property, that was enough. That was enough, believe me. Did not invite the police into my house. I asked him what it's about. He told me, look, voluntary interview. When I asked him, well, you say voluntary. If I don't come, what happens? His response was, oh, we will probably arrest you. So the voluntary interview ain't really all that voluntary, is it? It's not voluntary at all. This is basically we're being a bit more polite, because I know in other cases, I'm pretty sure in the raccoon emoji trial, he didn't get this. Do you want to have a voluntary interview thing? In the raccoon emoji trial, they just came and took him, arrested him. So at least I had the courtesy to come politely for a voluntary interview. Right? So now I've got to go down to the police station and talk about, and it just shows you the levels to which this country has lost its mind. Like, honestly, the levels to which this country has lost their mind, where they're persecuting people. And the reason I did, like I said, the video was because they are persecuting people like Marieha Hussain, people like the gentleman emoji trial. People like I've seen at least 2 other cases like this, and they're persecuting people on the ground. And I figured, look, if I put this out there, make it big, they're either gonna have to leave it alone and then just not come after anybody because it's done now, or they'll come after somebody high profile, right? Come after somebody who will say, look, no, that's not how it runs. Like somebody will just say, look, this has to end. So like, I'm not unhappy that the police have called. Something I was probably expecting given Dottie's thinking Babylon. And it's important that we rally around this. Not just because of my case, but just all the cases. Because this is nonsense. This is the police overstepping again and again and again with black and brown people, firstly, because it's always black and brown people that they do this to. And also black intellectual thought. This is part of the disrespect I talked about when they closed down the Black Studies degree. It's the disrespect of our thought. The idea that this is legitimate, that this should be there, this is something which must be studied, which must be respected, it's just not there. Alright? So even in in Marieha's case, police contacted me. I think I mentioned this in the video. Police contacted me and asked me, is it racist? I said, no. Right? Now I'm not big-headed about this. There's very few people qualified enough in this country to say whether it's racist or not, right? Just realistically, this is what I do. This is my living. This is what I'm going around the world talking about. And when they come and ask me is it racist, I say no. They still go ahead anyway, right? Then want to potentially prosecute me for the same thing. That's a disrespect for our knowledge, for our thought, right? This is why Black Studies is so important. Like, it shouldn't be the case that you have to have academic behind, you have to have books behind, it shouldn't be the case. But my hope was that having that as the case would then make it easier for people who don't have that support, don't have that backing of institutions, etc. Right? But obviously that's not even true either, because now they still come for the professors anyway. Can you imagine a white professor being pulled up for some language like this? Can you imagine that? You can't, because it wouldn't happen. Simply wouldn't happen. Not in a case like this. Not in a case where we're talking about language which is very, 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 very clearly anti-racist and not racist. Alright? But this is the problem with all this legislation, all this anti-racist stuff. That the reality is we think these laws are there to protect us. They are not. First people charged with inciting racial hatred or anti-racial was Black Power activists. From day, this isn't even new. So when you say this isn't even new, the idea that I would be pulled into court for this isn't even a new thing. That's been the thing from the very moment that we had these laws in the first place. Right? This is why when people talk about changing legislation, changing the law, politicians, burn all of that. Because none of that is for you and me. None of that is for you and me. Those anti-racist laws were passed to make mainstream society, white society feel better, and also to police the way that we protest. Right? That there are acceptable ways to protest. Yeah? And even more nefariously now, you look at what's happening with people, terrorism legislation being used to get pro-Palestine people, pro-Palestine activists, right? Look at prevent. I always say this to everybody, that preventing violent extremism and terrorism, for those people who aren't in the UK, prevent agenda is all about supposedly preventing extremism and terrorism. It's very, very much anti-Islam, anti-Muslim, right? About surveillance. I mean, there was surveilling people. I wrote about psychosis of whiteness, where they literally just properly, like, they actually set up cameras in and out of a I want to say Sparkbrook in Birmingham, majority Muslim area, and they at one point they made it like a virtual prison, like in and out. They could check everybody coming in and out, right? So they said, oh, this is for your own good, right? Prevent's been horrendous. Prevent is the same agenda where kids are getting arrested, or not arrested, kids are getting referred for de-radicalization. Because like kids as young as 10, 9, 8 in the schools because the teacher has picked it and said, look, oh, this person said something that could be terrorist. Right, one of the examples was, I think it was a 7-year-old kid, don't quote me the age, but I think a 7-year-old kid who said he lived in a terrorist house because he mixed up the word terrorist and terrorist, right? Terrorist and terrorist, pretty easy mistake to make, particularly when you're hyper-surveilled. And they sent him to de-radicalization training, thousands of kids. Right, madness, like this madness is going on, right? And Prevent has been heavily focused on Muslim populations. But I've been telling people for a long time, read the Prevent legislation, and half the things I say, half the things black radicals say, would come under Prevent, right? You're not supposed to be anti-government. You're not supposed to, the idea of saying revolution, that's in Prevent. You can't do that, right? And it's only when they fear us, they don't need to change the law to arrest us for these things. There's many things which I have said, and other people have said, that a different focus on us rather than Muslims You could arrest me now. You could arrest me for like 10. You could arrest me for so many things I've already said. So does it surprise me that the police are knocking on my door to potentially arrest me for something I said, knowing full well the context of it? Of course not. Right? And you should not be surprised either. Right? We should never be surprised when the system acts like the system. Babylon is Babyloning. We can't be surprised by that. But we do have to. What we have to do is we do have to resist it. We do have to say enough is enough. We do have to draw a line, right? You can't just let these things go on and on and on and on and on. So I welcome this. They're going to take this all the way. I welcome it. My hope is this gets dropped earlier, because next week it's Marieha Hussain's case. So Marieha Hussain had an initial court appearance a couple months ago, but a trial is actually for next week, so 12th of September, and that's the trial where we'll decide, whether she's found guilty or not for this coconut thing, right? Now, they seem very, very clear they want to convict us in the Magistrates Court. And actually, I'm going to look up, as I'm doing this, as I'm talking to you, I'm going to look up the date, because I want to give you the venue. So it's definitely 12th of September. It's definitely in London. It's definitely at 10 o'clock. I'm just going to make sure I can find you where it is, because you should go down if you can. Westminster Magistrates Court, 12th of September. It's going to be at 10, so I think about 9 o'clock is going to be a rally, protest, and you need to get people there. Because what happened last time, even last time there was a protest, I was going to go down, but I was out of the country, I wasn't around. And there were people with, I think it's four or five people from Cage, the charity, had the coconut placards saying, look, this is satire to the police. They were arrested too, so they are now awaiting charge after the trial, right? This trial is quite a big trial. If Marieha gets found not guilty, probably everything else disappears. So this is actually quite an important precedent setter to say, actually, no, look, come on, don't be ridiculous. Like, we need to make a stand here. So if you can go down 12th of September, I fully intend to be down there at the rally. To make as much noise and to put as much pressure on as possible, right? Because people's lives are being impacted by this. Look, my life's probably not going to be impacted any particular by this in any meaningful way, but people's lives are being. Marieha Hussain lost her job. Next person gets lose their job, lose their livelihood. You know what I'm saying? This is real stakes, right? This is the state coming after us and our thought, and then prosecuting people for that. You know what I'm saying? This is such an overstep, such an overreach. Right? And so we cannot allow this to happen. Like, honestly, we need to mobilize, we need all the support possible, we need to push back against this, because if the state keeps going, it's just all gone. Right? And so I remember, and even when I did the video, I heard through the grapevine, people go, oh, is he serious? Does he mean this? Is he da-da-da-da-da? Yes, I mean this. Whether or not you like the language, like, you can perfectly not like coconut, cooning, Uncle Tom, House Negro, sellout, etc., etc., etc. You cannot like it, but you cannot be in favor of it being criminalized. Those are different. Those are two different things that we shouldn't even say, well, I don't like the word God. That's fine. It's not about whether you like it. It's about, should it be a criminal offense to express yourself politically in these ways? Should you in any way, shape or form be comparing coconut to a white person calling you a nigger? No, because they're not the same. They're completely different things. They're not in the same family of things, right? And I'm not going to relitigate this. Go please check out the video, Make It Plain, YouTube channel. You will find my whole entire rant on this that hopefully does explain enough and give you the context. But we done something wrong if we're tone policing ourselves, right? As a community, we have to step up on this one. This is something we have to step up on and say enough is enough. Otherwise, where's the end to it? Right? Where's it into? This is black political force, this is black. No, it's the same thing. That's the same reason I'm so passionate about this. Is the same reason I'm so passionate about keeping black studies undergraduate degree. It's the same thing. This is our knowledge. This is our work. This is our intellectual heritage that we have to defend, whether you like it or not. Whether you agree with it or not isn't the point. The point is we have the right to say it. We have the right to call out cooning for cooning, whether you think that that's the appropriate language to use or not. And that's a really important principle for that. Anyway, so 9 o'clock, Westminster Magistrates Court, Marieha Hussain, 12th of September. If you can make it, please do go down. Please let's go down and make some noise. I'll keep you updated, posted on what happens in my potential case. In a minute, it's just interview. We will see. Yeah, after the break, we are going to have this discussion, me and Erika Brown, all about this idea of public intellectual, public scholarship. I mean, given what has just happened, we now being potentially arrested over this, what does that mean? What are the stakes of being a public intellectual, public scholar in the academia, with the university? What does that even mean? I mean, what can you say? I don't even know. What's the implications of potentially being arrested for a university professor? You know, I don't know. I just that happened today, so I don't know any of these things. But yeah, really, really good conversation. Erika Brown from Brokish. Do check out the Brokish podcast. She's currently doing a PhD, Texas Women's University, and like I said, partly supported, partly funded by the J. Nelson Institute for Women's Leadership, or those good white people. Anyway, thanks a lot for tuning in. Please do listen to the interview. Thanks.
So y'all, I am very happy to have on Brokish and together to do a mashup of Brokish and Make It Plain, Dr. Kehinde Andrews.
Happy to be here anyway. Happy to be here.
Are you?
Yeah.
It took a long time to get you here. So
I'm just I just like to point out to the brokers that it wasn't my fault. I've actually been waiting. I had to beg. I was like, please, can we do the Make It Plain Brokish collaboration? And it finally happened. So there you go.
Well, so you heard before I got on, I'm sort of talking about, and I don't know, in some ways I'm not lamenting the move to academia. I don't want to say that, but I'm having a hard time reconciling everything. But I do want to sort of ground us in a couple of questions. I accidentally hit the button and knocked you off. But the first question is, so we'll get to them, so you don't have to answer them now. We'll move through them. Mm-hmm. Do we, or how do we embody the values of the Black radical tradition in our work in podcasting? Okay. So I know why you're laughing. We'll get back to it. Okay. And the second is, what to us is public sociology? What is public scholarship? And how do we fit in that? So there are many, many components to that. But let's start with the Black radical tradition. Okay. So you want me to go first in talking about what I think the Black radical tradition is, or do you want to start? You're the guest, though.
Well, am I the guest? It's kind of a Make It Plain mashup. So am I really the guest? The guest and the host. Well, I wrote a whole book on this, so you should go first. There you go. Humble brag. And you can start.
I don't know if it's ever humble. Like, it's never. It's always a flex with you. But anyway, so I'll say this. If there are people who are like me, then they might have heard of the term, the Black radical tradition, sort of aligned with conversations about the Black Panther Party. So that was kind of like when I first heard that. So this is something that's been in my consciousness for a while, since I was little, growing up in Houston, Texas. And in Houston, they have this place called the Shrine of the Black Madonna. Mm-hmm. And so that was sort of like, in my memory, that was sort of like the hub of Black intellectualism, sort of Pan-Africanism, all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm automatically thinking about the Black Panther Party. But again, to this shift that I've made to academia, from an academic perspective, when I think about the Black radical tradition, then I am, of course, driven to the work of Cedric Robinson and Black Marxism and the making of the Black radical tradition, as the book is called. Mm-hmm. And so while it is clear that Cedric Robinson did not create, found, discover the Black radical tradition, he sort of popularized it in an academic sense. But again, my introduction to it is before that. Yeah. So if I go back to Robinson's work, he says in Black Marxism that the Black radical tradition is an accretion over generations of collective intelligence gathered from struggle. Now, to me,
can I just ask a question?
I was about to say, to me, Black Marxism is a struggle. The book, in terms of reading it as like a regular person, and I'm like, it's so thick. Anyway, think of an accretion as like the building of like rocks, so sort of like sediment falling into place, right? And building on. So think of it as stratification almost, but that's what an accretion is. And I know this because Google told me. But anyway, that's That's what Cedric Robinson said. But
Yeah.
as I was writing my own notes and thinking about it, I'm thinking about it as sort of the embodiment of generations of Black diasporic people.
Mhm.
And so all around the world. But we're connected in our efforts to maintain culture, knowledge, and connection, despite the efforts to exclude and disenfranchise us, right?
Mhm.
So it's basically we were together and then now we're apart. And the things that we do to maintain the culture from which we all originate, and the things we do to maintain our life in a world that's anti-Black. And I think it's sort of, I think of a metaphor of a bridge building, right? So it's sort of, we're building a bridge to liberation as we're living this life. So it's communal principles, it's anti-colonial beliefs, and it's a bent towards freedom. So that's what I'm thinking about the Black radical tradition. Okay, so you tell me.
I mean, it's a nice idea. I mean, I think one of the things that strikes me straight away is that when things come into academia, and we're in different positions, right? So I'm professor, you're coming into
And I'm not, right.
No,
Thank you.
it's not a flex, it's just a description, right? And I want to leave. I want to leave. You coming in and I want to go. And the reason I want to go is because when you're in academia, well, academia actually changes the nature of the kind of work that you do. So even the fact I had to ask you what's an accretion. Come on, like the way it's written, the politics kind of goes away. So your first encounter with Black radical tradition is the Panthers. It's very much political. It's very much grassroots. It's very much about the people. And then your second, and then now it's the academic dense text, which is presenting the tradition in a way that really isn't political. If you take that definition, this is not a political tradition. It's just anytime Black people think or learn or talk, it just kind of builds up, which isn't what I understand the Black radical tradition to be. That's a revolutionary tradition that says actually it's the knowledge about revolutionary knowledge, revolutionary freedom, grassroots, which is so different to the work that gets produced in academia. So I think that is, when you're in the university, is it really public scholarship at all? It is Black Marxism public scholarship.
Okay, so I think we got a couple questions here going on at the same time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you, and I just don't know this. And if y'all haven't figured out, in full disclosure, Kehinde and I are friends. Can I call you a friend? Are we friends? I mean, I know you're famous. You're British famous.
Definitely not famous. Yeah, you're a friend, I guess. Yeah, acquaintance, colleague.
Wow.
I'm joking. Of course you're a friend. Yes, me and Erika are friends.
That hurt. So you talk about the fact that the academy takes politics away. In your own life and experience, did you do your work ever outside of the academy, or have you always been a part of it?
I mean, honestly, since being young, I've been attached to universities for a long time, right? So 20 odd years. But I think most of my intellectual heritage has been outside. So Malcolm's across there, Malcolm, the public intellectual, if you like, the Black Panther Party. I mean, my work is so informed by the stuff outside. And most of my time in the universities has been spent criticizing Black academics, like Robinson, like
That ain't what I'm asking you, though. You're answering a question I'm not asking you. You talk about the fact that academia takes all of this stuff away, which is fair. Where does the politics go? And I understand you developed your politics outside of academia, but have you done the work anywhere but in academia?
Yeah, so concretely, I mean, when I finished my PhD, I founded the Harambee organization, Organization of Black Unity as it was then. So found Malcolm X. Malcolm X gives you a whole constitution for the revolutionary organization, and then founded it in the community, did the work, did community discussion, and that has been where I've developed my work. So if you read Back to Black, if you read New Age of Empire, I mean, I'm in a university, but it's actually produced in trying to do the organization, trying to do the grassroots work successfully, unsuccessfully, but without that, my work would be so different that it would be unrecognizable. But having said that, I can also accept that being in the university has limited the amount of community stuff you can do, because I do have to, when you're in, you have to write in terrible ways. Like you have to write analyticals, you have to write boring. For example, my last book, Psychosis of Whiteness, my mother-in-law said that's the first book she could actually read. Like every other book, I thought they were like really accessible. But she said, "No, this is the first one I could read." because there's a way we get trained to write. We're
Sure.
really writing for white people, not the community. So there's always a challenge. Can you do both of them really at the same time? I don't know.
Well, it sounds like you think you do know, and the answer to you is like, no, you can't. I don't know. Am I putting words in your mouth?
Yeah, it's no. I always say to people, I am not radical because I'm in the university. It's not possible. You can't be a radical scholar and be in the university. The two things don't go together.
Okay,
Chalk
but
and cheese.
let's just go back to the tradition though, right? And so the notion of the Black radical tradition, not necessarily the notion of radicalism as a standalone term. So essentially what you're saying, that all the things that I thought I so eloquently put together to describe the Black radical tradition, you're saying that it has to be more than Black people's existence. It has to be revolutionary. And I guess I'm suggesting that us being able to do these things in spite of all the things, right? that is radical, right? Like our existence. And I don't mean it in the silly way of we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Like, I don't mean it in that way.
Yeah.
I just mean it literally in the sense that we aren't supposed to be here. Like, it wasn't meant for us to be here. And the things and the culture and the information that got shared to be able to make the way for us to be here, like, that seems to me a little bit radical. I don't know.
No, but we are supposed to be here, right? Like, I mean, slavery wasn't supposed to kill us because then we can't do the work. Like, had we just not existed, that probably would have been more revolutionary, right? Because slavery couldn't have happened, right? I mean, it's like
to live in a world that is so anti-Black is a very powerful. It's a very powerful thing. And this is not at all to say that people who choose not to be in the world are like lack courage or anything like that. But it also takes courage to live and continue to live in the world in spite of some really bad circumstances, right? And so I don't know, that to me is a radical imagining of our humanity, that it persevered. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say it's nothing because obviously it's something, and it's something that we should be proud of, and obviously the cultures that got created, etc. But I think if
you're just not proud.
No, I think there's an intellectual tradition. I just don't think there's a quote. I'm going to quote Malcolm probably extensively throughout this conversation.
Y'all, there's a drinking game. If you are drinking every time he says Malcolm, you're going to die. You will have alcohol poisoning.
Yeah,
he's going to say Malcolm 100 more times today.
I already done it twice. So far I'm twice. So yeah. Anyway, so Malcolm, for those doing the drinking game. Malcolm says that this word revolutionary has been misused.
Sure.
And it's really important because when we say there's a Black radical tradition and we include everything in it, we miss the fact that actually within Black intellectual, I'd call it the Black intellectual tradition, there are massive disagreements. Like, we disagree with each other, but not just like but like fundamental disagreements that you can't reconcile, right? And so when I say radical, for me, radical means revolutionary. It means the politics of overturning the system. It means a particular thing. And to muddy it all together is something that I actually would probably say is an academic thing, because academics like to say we're radical, we like to say this, we like to feel comfortable in our spaces, without actually saying that. So a lot of the work we're reading really is telling us we shouldn't be in these spaces. Like, if I read Malcolm, if I read the Panthers, if I read Nkrumah, they're saying don't be in these spaces. But we've kind of rationalized it in a way so we can feel better about essentially, I don't want to say selling out, but no, selling out. Let me say it like it's selling out. This is what we've done. I'm only in this job because I get paid a decent wage. That's it.
Okay, so speak for yourself, right? Because to be very clear, right? I have a job at the university, right? I am funded by grants at my university, but they're not enough for me to be able to live off of. And you know, as my colleague, not friend, that I had a decades-long career before I started doing this, that I left because of this sort of internal intrinsic call to do something different. Like, is that radical that I walked away from my career making literally 10 times more than I do now to come and do this?
That's a radical urge. My worries for anybody coming through, the way you get trained in academia is it trains that radicalism. Change that radicalism out of you. right? Think about what they're asking you to do. Think about what they're asking you to read. Think about the way you have to write. Think about it must feel different for you having done the podcast, which is one thing, and then coming into this space, and it's a very, very different thing. It can't be the easiest transition, I would have thought.
I think the transition isn't easy for a lot of different reasons, right? I'm older now than most of my classmates. I just have a different worldview, politics, ideology than I probably would had I done this 20 years ago. But I don't know if it's difficult. In my case, I don't know if it's difficult because of the training, because a lot of my academic career, I get to sort of lead how I do it. And I get to be in charge of the research that I do. So on the one hand, I come to you today saying this research is, supported in part by the Jane Nelson Institute, right, for women's leadership. But on the other hand, through that grant funding, I can sort of have this conversation to you and do the kind of research that I want to do. So that actually takes me to the next point about public scholarship in general. So not only is what I'm doing right now funded by academic sources, but I'm sure that Make It Plain has some funders. So you tell me if I'm wrong. Make It Plain has some non-community funders.
It did. It doesn't anymore. So originally it did, but now it's all.
Okay. So the people that made it possible for Make It Plain, maybe they're not here anymore, but they were there.
Okay. They were. I know white people too. Yeah.
Okay.
So
you had some friendly white people who gave you some money. And really, how do you reconcile that? Because as I sit here talking to you about this, knowing that this set of shows that I'm thinking about producing has a funder, I'm more conscious of everything that's happening. So you and I, like, to just be totally transparent, you and I had a conversation where I was like, okay, don't come on here saying some of the stuff that you would normally say. Like, right, I need to keep my money. I don't want any trouble, right? We can't talk about people like we would normally say. There will be no N-words today. Like,
yeah. But that's what I'm saying, but that's the point. That's the point.
Yes, that's very much the point. How do we reconcile that in a capitalist society where we are required to get money to do things, but also in a world where we don't want to be censored? How do you do that?
It's difficult. And I think there's two things I'd say. One is the metaphor I've used to justify staying an academic, which honestly is mostly about money for me at this point. But the metaphor that I use to justify it is that our role is very much like slave preachers. Bear with me, it's going to get positive, I promise. So the thing about the slave preacher was elevated.
I'm a Jesus lover, so be careful.
No, it's not really a Christian thing, but the slave preacher was elevated to teach the enslaved to be passive, right? And if we're 100% honest, that's what higher education is. That's why they got black people into higher education, because there was all these rebellions on the streets, and they wanted us to calm down, and they put us into university, said you get good jobs, and what our role is pacifying the masses. But having said that, if you look at the slave rebellions, Nat Turner, America, Sam Sharp, Jamaica, many of the slave rebellions are led by the slave preacher, because the slave preacher has an elevated position, can talk to large groups of people, can travel through around different plantations, can read the Bible, reads a very different version of the Bible. So that elevated position gave the slave preacher the opportunity to foment revolution. And we have that opportunity in academia. Problem is, most of us just act like slave preachers. Like, we can do it, it's possible, but most of us don't do it. Like, I'll just be real. And I haven't spent.
Well, you keep telling me two things. Either it's possible or it's not. Because I thought earlier on we were talking about, and you're like, it's not really possible to like use this positionality or this position to be able to like lead the community in a radical or truly political way. But now are you saying it is?
It's theoretically possible, but if I'm being blunt about it, the problem is actually us, not the system. And the problem is when you try, because of the training is so severe, you try and find five black academics who have that revolutionary mindset. I haven't seen it. And this is a long time. I'm trying to look for it because it conditions us. And so that's why it's tantalizing. There's always this possibility, but you can never get the support to do it, because most of us are
stuck in that slave preacher mentality. People are gonna hate me after this, but I'm not gonna name any names, but that's the reality.
But is it like, again, I really feel like this is not my reality because again, I'm not doing this for money. I'm not doing this because I want entree into the academy. I'm doing this like purely out of personal intellectual curiosity. And this is just one of the ways that I decided to do it. I could have done it in other ways. And so I don't know how this takes away from, and at the same time, again, I recognize that I censored you before you came on the show and I censored myself before we
I
came.
wasn't listening, by the way, so if I need to drop a coon here and there, I might do. But still.
See, I told you.
I was raccoon, by the way. It was nothing.
When I get out of school, I just want you to know that you are.
Oh, good. But no,
Okay.
but your way in may protect you because your way in is very different. But the thing is, once you start to say, but even in your position, like, it's not necessarily about money, because it's not the money's not really the problem. It's the fact that the things you need to do to get further in your career are all things which aren't public, right? So I didn't become professor because I do work in community, because I'm on television, because none of that got me professor. It was boring journal articles. It was boring conferences. It was all a lot of boring stuff which I hated doing, which took me away from doing Make It Plain, doing community, which I should have been doing this for the last 10 years, but only really started doing it because I got more flexibility now. All the things you're going to do to get in your career are going to be non-public and be quite damaging to the community. That's the reality. And that changes you doing that, you actually become changed in that process. That's what I said. Is it public? It's not, because to do sociology is not public. Sociology is not public. As a thing, it's not public. So
Okay,
then you have
so
to do something intentional to be public, right?
let's take 2 steps back and talk about your training as a sociologist and talk about what public sociology and sociology in general, what they mean to you.
What do they mean to me? Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, like, I think, I don't know how much listeners know what a PhD is. It's a bit different in the UK, which has also helped me. In the UK, we don't really have doctoral training like you guys have. Like, it's like you have classes, and it's a lot more training. Whereas in the UK, we just write 3 years, you just write something. That gives you, we have a lot more flexibility. So I missed out on a lot of the training. I didn't really do a lot of that, which maybe I'm not that great a sociologist. might explain a lot. But, sociology is science of society. It's a bunch of dead white men with their methods and ways of thinking. It is, come on, you telling me you write a paper, it's got Marx, Weber. Was Durkheim in there? I'm sure Durkheim
Yes.
came in.
Yes.
All these racist, anti-black people, their theories. And that's the basis of a discipline, right? And that's how you learn, like, what is sociology? It's to be a dead white man. A follower of a dead white man. That is what a sociologist is.
I really need one of those chyrons on the screen that just says the views expressed by Kehinde Andrews are not those of Erika Brown. I just need the chyron running, like, because.
But no, I mean, it's not totally useless. There's been some great black sociologists. There's some really good work in sociology. Do not get me wrong. I'm not saying there's no good sociology. Patricia Collins, excellent example of a sociologist. So, but the problem is, though, sociology is not public. So this whole the term public sociology comes out of this paper by Michael Burrowoy, who's a perfect
famous sociologist.
Is he famous? I would bet nobody listening to this has heard of Michael Burrowoy. I'm gonna guess. Maybe
he's a famous sociologist, which
in sociology, yeah, famous. Yeah. That's the point. It's a bubble. It's not the real world. Even Patricia Collins probably isn't that famous outside of academia. It's like a different world, all right, where everything's internal. So Burrowoy tries to say, look, let's have public sociology, where we make sociology useful and we put sociology in the public sphere and da 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 da. It's a nice idea, but the problem with the idea is, if you have knowledge which is produced in this really white bubble, and then you want to share it, is that actually a good thing? Is that a positive thing?
So first of all, especially because I'm working on this paper and I'm using what I think is the Black radical tradition. I'm ignoring you. And I'm using the Black radical tradition to sort of reclaim not the lost scholarship or legacies of some Black and other scholars, but just sort of to highlight that work and talk about how it's not just, as you say, dead white men, right? Where the knowledge production happens. And so sort of to that point, do I think that there can be a public sociology in the same way that I'm asking the question, can there be a Black radical tradition in the academy?
Mhm.
And I'm going to have to say that the answer is yes, or why am I here?
Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
my work started as public, and I don't want it to all of a sudden now be private. So the things that I work on in school, I want to and will bring those to my audience once they've been peer reviewed.
Exactly. Peer reviewed by who? Who's peer reviewing this stuff? Come on.
Once they have been peer reviewed, and I can share.
Just for background information here, like, so when we write journal articles, they go to peer review. It's anonymous. 2 people anonymously do it. They're more than likely going to be white people. So you have to write in a particular way. Erika is waiting for. You have to wait a long time. She was currently waiting a long time for your reviews. Did you like this process? I'm gonna ask. Did you really like writing in this way? Did you like the process? Are you enjoying it so far?
I don't mind. Academic writing doesn't bother me because I've never been. So keep in mind, my training is in business, and business training is bullet points. So I'm not trained as any kind of a writer. And so this notion of writing to me is just new because I've never been a writer. So academic writing, because I was never trained as a writer, is fine. That's just basically how I learned to do it. So I don't have a problem.
No, that sounds really bad. You need to do different kinds of writing. Come on.
Well, look, I'm gonna stop you right there. This is an exclusive. I've got my first op-ed published.
Congrats.
This is public scholarship.
Yes.
So here we have Yes Magazine, the fall 2024 edition. Here's my article.
Well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. But
What's it about?
what'd you say?
What's it about?
Oh, it's about financial literacy. And it's called The False Prophets of Profit.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about how, can I be academic? It's about how there are some Black people, Black celebrities mostly, who sort of commodify Black culture and identity to get Black people to invest, Black Americans to invest in schemes that are too risky for where they are financially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, sounds useful. Public scholarship. Is it sociology though?
I have one of my academic articles that I wrote is in a similar vein, deals with a similar subject. It just hasn't been peer reviewed. I don't know. You're not going to make me say that I came back to school after being out of school for 20 years and I'm studying sociology. You're not going to make me it's public and it's sociology. You're not going to make me say that it's not. Because
I wasn't going to 100%. No, I just, because one of the things one of the things which has kept me sane is doing op-eds. So a few years ago I started doing op-eds, and it's so different, the writing, and it's just better in many ways. Like, I hate doing it. And just to be honest, I don't like doing academic writing anymore. And if I can avoid it, I will avoid it like the plague. Because of the way it is, because it's restricted, because of who's it for. Even the other day, I've got an article coming out on reparations. And,
is it an academic article?
An academic article, yes,
okay.
On reparations. I have to do one every so often. Just it's the job in it, right? And there were all these comments saying, "Oh, this is a bit informal. Can you change the words?" Well, like, you just want me to make it sound complicated. Like, you don't want me to change the content. It's just use more complicated words. I mean, come on, it's nonsense. I said no. I didn't do it. They didn't change it, thankfully. But to be honest, that's only because I am who I am. If I was a junior scholar, no chance. They just reject it. So that's what I'm saying. You get trained into writing a particular way, right? It's not. I don't know. You'll see.
Well, no, I went to a conference in New Orleans earlier in the year, and one of the things that somebody said that probably many people say, but it was the first time I heard it, so it really resonated with me, is how the discipline disciplines us. Yes. And I think, to your point, right, that's just through the training. That's one of the ways that the discipline disciplines us in, whatever way is good and bad. But
it's all bad. Isn't it? Well, I'm trying to think of the positives, and I can't think of any. But hey, that's
You and I argue a lot, okay, have spirited debates, whatever you want to call it, right? And one of the things that we were talking about in relation to this theme is about who is an intellectual, who is an academic. So I want you to sort of help me to figure some of that out. So let me just describe again who I am. So I am Erika. I am a student, a sociology student. I am pursuing a doctorate in sociology. Okay. So outside of having a master's in business administration, I am not yet a doctor, but I am in school. And you have you, who is the UK's only full professor of Black Studies.
and maybe last as well. But you guys are last professor, full professor. Of that.
Well, look, I don't know about that.
Grand opening, grand closing.
So, right, that's who you are. You've been doing this for 20 years, whatever it is. So, which one of us is an academic? Which one of us is a scholar? Who is doing public work? Who isn't? And then also, I'm going to ask you about some other people that we know. Side note.
Oh, well, we name names. I don't want to get in trouble.
Whatever. Side note, another thing that I'm thinking about in having an episode that's sponsored, right, is I'm thinking about, well, who is the public? Because ordinarily I'm thinking that my audience is who we call the brokers, right? So the folks from Make It Plain, the people who listen to and watch Brokish, we call brokers. And I know the brokers and they know me and they know my co-host Amber. So I'm not having to explain a lot in the background because most of the brokers, most of our followers are Black Americans, right? So I don't have to like fill in a lot of gaps. But today I was like, oh, if we're going to talk about people like Dr. Umar, right? Or we're going to talk about people like Mark Lamont Hill, right? People may not know who those folks are. And so that's just another limitation. But anyway, so that was a side note, just in terms of thinking about this conversation in general. But
do you want to say who is sponsored by again? Do you want to put the plug in? Just so.
I don't. But I want to talk about who is who and who's not who. And yeah, so tell me your thoughts on that.
Who's who? So I would say definitely both public scholars, intellectuals, whatever that means. I mean, I don't like the term public intellectual because I think
you have it in your bio that you gave to me.
Someone else wrote it. I just sent it, to be honest. I didn't write it. But for me, all intellect should be public, and the problem with the university is it closes it up, right? But certainly, if you're doing public work, you're public. If you talk to the public, you're a public intellectual, right? So the way I usually describe this, take a drink, Malcolm, right? Think about Malcolm X. Malcolm X is for me, the most important intellectual on race, blackness of the 20th century by a distance, actually. And he doesn't finish school, high school, let alone go to university. Has never stepped into university, but the knowledge produced, because it's produced in struggle, is the best knowledge for me. Now, if Malcolm was born today, Malcolm would be a professor. But the question I'll flip back to you would Malcolm X, the professor, still be the Malcolm X we all know and love?
Ask Angela Davis.
What would you think? Yeah, God, the answer is definitely no.
I mean, you have some examples of this, right? Like, this doesn't have to be theoretical.
But it's the thing with theoretical. Like, Malcolm's theoretical, it's just not convoluted. Like, that's the thing. Like, Malcolm has theory, but
no, I'm saying your question doesn't have to be theoretical of what would become of Malcolm. I'm just saying that you could take Angela Davis as an exemplar of what happens. And I also wonder what happens to people over time, right? When people get the benefit of being able to age, what happens to their politics over time? And while I know that you think that the spirit of Malcolm lives within you, we don't know. I didn't say you said it. I said you think.
He's right there.
Right. And while I think we want to believe that Malcolm would be, trying to change people's political ideologies from the nursing home, right? We don't know. We don't know what what would be
no. I agree, but this is my point in Malcolm. The most likely thing that would happen to Malcolm is he would have sold out. Most likely, if he'd have lived. That's what happened to most people, right?
no, he would have sold out by taking on the job you have today. That's what that is.
Yeah, even if he'd lived, he probably would have become a professor because around about the time there's all the Black Studies departments opening, he probably would have become part of the furniture. The fact that he died means that we have that pure revolutionary Malcolm, and that's the Malcolm we want, right? Put Malcolm in university, he is Angela Davis or Cornell West or whoever else you want to, Kehinde Andrews, whoever else you want to go, right? Like this. Well, Angela Davis' autobiography is a perfect example of this. You ever read Angela Davis' autobiography?
No.
I don't want to drag Angela too much because it's not for me to do.
Please don't drag anybody. We're not here dragging people today.
I don't drag, but it really shows you the tradition. So she goes to her
the Black radical tradition. What tradition does it show you?
No, it shows you Angela Davis' tradition where she goes to she is one of those people who goes to university, goes to a white university, one of that first cohort that goes to white universities, is trained very in political science in the white ways, goes to Germany, comes back. And that really does shape from the beginning her outlook, which is why now people criticize Angela Davis. I'm not surprised because actually look at that tradition. It is a very, very, very academic, intellectual tradition. And so when people
Du Bois went to Germany and Du Bois didn't Du Bois became more, I guess he's an example of somebody who, in my opinion, became more radical the longer they lived, in ways that most people don't. He did. Come on.
Du
Bois did become more radical the longer he lived.
Oh yeah, he became more radical, but that's like saying Dr. Umar became more white the longer he lived. Because I don't know, what does that mean? Maybe that's a bad example. I don't know, but LeBron James became shorter the longer he lived, right? Because he was really tall and he became a little bit shorter. Du Bois that's what I would say with radical tradition. Du Bois' friend, Kwame Nkrumah, called Du Bois a bourgeois Negro reformist. This is at the end of his life, not at the beginning of his life. He knew the man. He was his close friend. Bourgeois Negro reformist. Du Bois never really changed. I just gotta be honest. But again,
he did. You're not gonna. You know what? You're not gonna do that to me. You're not gonna do that to me today. You're not gonna do that to the people listening and watching this. Du Bois did.
It changed, but not. It didn't really change. And no one ever really changes. I mean, again, Du Bois is that classical trained academic, so you shouldn't be surprised he doesn't. He's not revolutionary. Du Bois is not. I think we can agree. Du Bois never became a revolutionary.
He's an academic revolutionary. But anyway, we're missing the point that we're going back to the question and
who's the public intellectual?
Right. Who counts? Do I count? Do you count? We were answering that question. People like Dr. Umar is he a public academic? Who counts?
No, so I mean, anybody who's in the public and people know are public intellectuals. It's not necessarily
I said academic.
Academic? Is he an academic? What's the benefit of being an academic? What does he need to be an academic?
I'm not saying he needs to. I'm just trying to define some things. I need to know how when I send my bio out, what I put in it.
Umar is not an academic, public academic.
How do you define an academic? No.
So this is I think that distinction is important. An academic is someone who works is part of a university.
You have to be working at a university, in your opinion, to be an academic.
Trained. I mean, Du Bois. Go back to Du Bois second is a good example actually. So Du Bois early on isn't really a public. He does his PhD. He's a university scholar. Then he joins NAACP. He actually leaves academia because it's so racist for a bit, and that's where we know Du Bois from, right? We actually know Du Bois' public work really because he leaves university, and he only ever really goes back at the end. If Du Bois had stayed Harvard professor, we would not really talking about Du Bois in the same way we're talking about him now. He'd probably been lost mostly. Because actually his sociological work, they ignore it all the time. Like Souls of Black Folk is not. they just totally ignore it. Souls of Black Folk he's not an academic at that point, right? It's not an academic piece of work.
No, it's not.
But that's what we remember. So again, surely it's better to be out than to be in.
But I do think that Souls of Black Folk, for example, is a work of the Black radical tradition. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Black tradition, yeah. Well, I don't know. Do you think Dr. Uber? Angela Davis is certainly a public scholar, right? People know who she is. Public academic as well.
I think she is. I don't know. I don't want to split hairs too much about this, but again, you said am I an academic? I don't have my credentials. What does that mean for somebody like me?
Oh yeah, now you're in, right? You present yourself as doctoral student, sociological work. The work that you're producing, and I think that's important. The work that you're producing is produced, at least is influenced by academia, by university. Yeah, I guess that makes you an academic. Okay. So now what you do and what you write, that op-ed, I'm sure part of the stuff you did for your research in university came into the op-ed, right? So yeah, public academic.
Oh, thank you. It's the first time anybody's ever said that about me.
It's not a compliment, but it's not a compliment coming from me. So
I know, I get that.
But do we need academics? That's the question. Because most public intellectuals for Black people have not historically been academics and are not currently academics. So Dr. Umar, for example, has way more influence than me or you or any academic I know, but he's not an academic. 100%. Malcolm, Panthers, even Claudia Jones over here in the UK. Most of our intellectual work isn't done in universities. And I think that makes
But does that invalidate the work that is?
No, I think it makes it more valid. Again, I'm anti-university, as I'm saying.
No, I'm saying, does that invalidate the work that then happens in the university? Even though most of the work that's done for us is not created in the university.
So I don't want to write off all academics. Obviously, I know lots of Black academics and there's lots of good work. But I think the best work is that work that is informed largely by the stuff outside. So the defense I'll make of my work is that I just draw on all the intellectual tradition from outside university. It's very rare that I'm drawing on something inside the university to say this is a good thing. Sometimes there's some great work. There's some good work. Don't get me wrong. Kehinde Martin Taylor's book, Race for Profit, for example, that's just a spectacular piece of work. So it's not all bad, and I don't want to say it's all bad because I'm really not saying that. But I don't think we should. Yeah, this is the problem I have, and even in community spaces, even I don't go by professor. I say don't call me doctor. That shouldn't be something that makes us elevate the work. Like, there can be good work produced in the university, but there can be some terrible work produced in the university, and it isn't because it's in the university. It does not make it ever higher quality, and oftentimes makes it a lower quality. That's it.
So how do we prevent, or how do we manage these contradictions that just inherently exist, right? You are getting paid by the institution that you hate. Maybe hate is the wrong word. I don't know. No, but you understand what I mean. Okay. Erika is not getting paid by a university that she hates. Erika does not hate her university.
You love it, right?
To be very clear.
You love that foundation. What was the foundation they gave you?
The Jane Nelson Institute for Women's Leadership. Stop it. Stop it. So how do you manage these contradictions?
No, I think this is,
you eat on the back of the university you hate.
Yeah, no, it's hard, right? And what I stress to any younger scholar or any scholar listening to this is I'm actually not saying don't do it. That's not what I'm saying. The reason I'm so scornful about it is I think it's important to have that, to not feel comfortable. As soon as you feel comfortable, you've lost. Like, as soon as you don't see the, and this is to go back to Angela Davis. I met her once. I asked her one question. It wasn't one-to-one. It was in a big audience. And I asked her, this question you asked me, right? How do you deal with the contradictions? And her answer was, well, there's no contradictions because I'm outside the university all the time. I was floored. I was like, what kind of answer is that? That don't make no sense. Like, there are contradictions. The university is a white racist space. The things we're asked to do are largely against our people. And if we're trying to do work which is about Black liberation, it's going against what the university is. Now, you can do it and you can make a case and you can carve some space out and try and do work. But if you don't understand there's a contradiction, you've lost straight away. So keep that contradiction there, keep uncomfortable, and hopefully that will push you to do something that's far more useful.
And to be clear, of course, I feel the tension, right? And I especially feel the tension coming off of this conference. So for those of you who don't know, in sociology, sort of the premier conference is the American Sociological Association's conference. And this year it was held in Montreal. So I was in Montreal last week, which is weird because why do they have it in Montreal? Because I thought it would, anyway, I'm not going to get into that.
America, continental America.
That's not what anybody thinks over here.
You know why they did it? Because they want a holiday. Because these academic conferences are about holiday. That's what they're mostly about. Holiday. They wanted to go to Montreal.
Let me get back to the conference, okay? So last year I went to the conference. It was in Philadelphia. That's actually where I met you, or at the Association of Black Sociologists. I guess is where
I don't go to the white one because I'm down for
you did go to the white one. Stop it!
I snuck in. I didn't pay. I went for free. I bootlegged it with Patricia.
So anyway, so I met you at this set, and every other year I think, except like usually they're like together one year and then they're not together the next year. Anyway, for the past 2 years they were actually together, right? The Black Sociologists and then the American Sociological Association.
The White Sociologists Association.
I was just waiting for you to say it. So last year I went to the conference and I left feeling really reinvigorated, rejuvenated. I left feeling like I can go out and tackle this, right? I can go out, I can do work. It can be great. This year, I came home feeling defeated and demotivated and sort of just unsure of myself. And I don't think it's imposter syndrome. I feel very much, so you talk about sort of the tension. I feel the tension and sort of the incongruency. I was like, it just didn't feel like I fit. And so on the one hand, that frustrates me. And on the other hand, it's like, I'm going to fit. I'm going to make a space. They're not going to beat me down. And I don't know what to do. Like I have all that sort of inside and I don't know what to do with all of it, especially with the backdrop of me having 3 academic papers that are sitting with publishers waiting for people to render a verdict on the validity and the viability of my scholarship. So all the things that you talk about in terms of feeling comfortable, do Black academics ever feel comfortable? I mean, even the ones who are in favor, like even the ones who have academic favor, do they ever feel comfortable? I don't know how you.
They feel comfortable. I probably Paul Gilroy. If I'm going to drag somebody, Paul Gilroy is a British academic. The premier Black British academic, in fact, is probably Paul Gilroy.
Oh, it's not you.
It's not me. Geez, I'm not even considered an academic, really. But he's definitely comfortable anyway. I won't go into the Paul Gilroy slander, but I think that uncomfortable. Okay, so where you're at is where a lot of people are, and I certainly was. And I think that leaves you 2 routes, right? One of those routes is I'm going to conform and do everything I can to do the things which I should do to fit into this space, which is what you definitely shouldn't do, right? What you should do is say, actually, no, they don't want me. They don't want me. I don't fit here. That's good. So let me carve out a different space. And that's what we don't do. That's the problem. So what problem we tend to do is just tend to conform. So I mean, so we have the British Sociological Association, which is like ASA but smaller. And I used to go to that all the time. Terrible. But you meet people. I mean, it's good to meet people, right? And I never give. So one of the things about academic conferences is that lots of people tend to read out their papers. Like, I can read your paper. I don't need you to read it to me. And it's so boring. My mind just glazes over. If anybody does it, my mind glazes over. So I never do this, right? I just go and talk. And there was this white guy there.
Some people just like to prepare, okay? Some people are, or some people are not.
Come on, like, even if you just give me the bullet points, give me the top line, read it out. And it's boring. It's not even like he's reading. It's not like reading a book. It's like reading. I don't know. It's boring. I can't imagine you enjoy listening to people read out their boring papers. Anyway, aside. So I only ever talk. And this white guy said afterwards, he goes, "Oh, I like to read my paper because when you do your stuff, it's not that complicated, so it doesn't really need to be written down, does it?" I was like, sorry, excuse me. Now, in that moment, I could have been all embarrassed. I go, "Oh my God, next time let me write my paper." I just went, what the hell? I politely told him, can I swear? I don't know if I can swear because of the foundation.
You've already broken all of the rules and don't care about the fact that this episode is sponsored by the Jane Nelson Institute of Women's Leadership. Like, you already don't care.
Bearing in mind I won't swear, but just imagine I swore in my head. And when but in that moment, a lot of people would conform, right? And say, actually, no, let me write it, let me fit in, I want to fit in. I went the complete opposite way. And even Black studies. So 12 years ago, it was a while ago when I sat down with a group of Black academics and we were all saying, look, Black studies is a great idea. We had this big Black studies conference. First one of its kind. And we was like, yeah, let's do it. 30 of us sitting around the table. And I was like, okay, well, let's start doing Black studies. Call it Black studies research, Black studies. And I'm the youngest person there. They're all like, no, you can't do this. It's too, let's just call it multicultural studies, or let's just do something else. We've got to conform. And I was like, no, we're doing it. Let's do it. Like, just do black. And the advice I got from older people was, if you do that, you will have no career. And actually, it's the opposite. My career went like this because it's different, right? Completely different, new, different, credible. And so actually, sometimes we think we have to conform and be like the white people. But actually, if you make a different space, you can actually be way more successful, even in the space you don't want to be in, ironically.
So let's talk about part of this different space for you. So again, as I'm thinking about, for me, this is a series of podcasts, and I'm talking to you about public scholarship, Black radical tradition, and those sorts of things. Given your specific or your unique positionality or role as sort of a British media darling.
Darling is not a word. Darling, they hate me. Jeez.
So I do want you to just talk a little bit about how you ended up because there are different types of public scholarship, right? Because there are different media. And so, for example, with Make It Plain and then with Brokerage, we're using podcasting as a media, but you also have this specific lane of like television media, also news, print media. So tell us more about how you ended up in that lane and how you do the work there.
So like I said, I've never liked academic writing. Never been my thing to do, but you have to do it. But I've always wanted to do other kinds of writing. So a few years ago, 2016, I want to say, probably 16, 17, I just started pitching. You can just pitch to all these newspapers. You can just send in pitches. I've got this idea for an article about this thing.
I know that because I have an op-ed.
And there you go. If you want to write, just write. And I got ignored. Mostly they ignore you. Ignored for about a year. And then they picked up, was it Black Studies? I don't know. They picked up something. Guardian picked up something. And then they published it. And then after that, I just kept writing. I wrote loads. I wrote for them for a very, very, very long time. And I just enjoyed it. But it's way better. It's a way better way of writing and engaging and reach more people from doing those op-eds. That's when TV came and said to me, oh, do you want to do? No, I think the Guardian said, do you want to make a video? So I made a video, The West is Built on Racism, which turned into a book eventually. If you're going to do the work, right? And then from there, just get invited to do talk on TV. But I don't know, without doing the op-eds, I don't know if I've ever done TV because academics can't really do TV because it's so like you have these segments that are really small. You have to get your point across really quickly. It's not convoluted. And it just, it's such a different medium. So I've just been doing that for a while. And they like you. They keep getting you back onto it. But I prefer it. And now I prefer it. So now I'm like, actually, no, this is what I want to do. Let me Make It Plain as a website. Let's do podcasting. And I'd much rather do that, to be honest. It's just a much better way of engaging. But talking about the contradictions, I've been on Good Morning Britain, which I guess is like Good Morning America, a few times. And it actually cost me a job. There's a high profile job I went for in academia. And the behind the scenes feedback I got was, well, he's on Good Morning Britain, so he's not really a serious academic. And that was literally how it was. And so doing that work has actually damaged my academic career. But I'm not unhappy. Well, I mean, I get paid.
You seem very unhappy, though.
No, it proves the point, right? It proves the point. You got to do both. You can't be public and be academic.
Okay, let's go back to, in a very academic sense, let's go back to the initial question, right, that we talked about at the beginning about how do we embody the values of the Black radical tradition in podcasting. And so in this question, I'm thinking sort of about, again, the Black Panther Party. I'm thinking about newspaper. I'm thinking about flyers. I'm thinking about how the Black Panther Party used the technology of the press, of news, to be able to get and communicate their message, and sort of us doing the same thing. So do you think that we are living in that tradition through podcasting, or is it like, be for real, this is 21st century technology? No.
I think they're certainly using the technology that we have, definitely. But I think the question, and this is the question about public sociology, you have these podcasts, right, that are basically sociology. You're having sociological discussions on a podcast. That for me is not in the tradition of the Black Panther Party. That is just academic stuff.
Is that what you think Make It Plain is?
Oh no, that's totally different. Like that's not that at all, right? Like so. But I think
so who has these podcasts where they're talking about sociology? Not us. So I'm talking about us. What you are doing with Make It Plain and what I am doing with Brokish.
Yeah, they're different. We're making the distinction, right? So like when we're on our podcast, I don't know, you're an academic. I don't feel like an academic. I'll make it plain that.
But you told me I was an academic and now you're taking it back. Like, come on, be consistent. You told me I was one. You said, yes, you're an academic. And now you're like, no, you're not an academic on your podcast.
Do you feel like you're an academic on your podcast?
What is it, a coat that I put on and take off? Like,
no, because so much about academic is the method, right? Like where you write, how you're writing, how you're doing it. And the podcast format is just different. So, if you're chatting to Amber and you're just talking and you're just having and you bring in a guest and you're just talking, that you're not always an academic. That's not point. Academic's a job. Like it's a job. And there are parts of my job where I'll be very like academic. In most of my life, I'm the academic as a person. And when I'm on the podcast, I wouldn't say it's academic at all. Right now, I guess it's academic because we're talking about academia. But I wouldn't say even now. I don't think I'm giving you the academic version of this conversation. If that makes sense.
It doesn't, but it's okay. It's okay.
Doesn't it make sense? Like right now, are you talking as an academic? Are you talking as doctoral student Erika Brown?
I'm not thinking about it that I'm thinking about it like you said. It's as a job, right? And so if I'm a plumber, I'm a plumber whether or not I'm on a podcast or whether I'm in front of somebody's toilet. I'm a plumber. Like that, where I'm standing doesn't change who I am.
It does. If you're a plumber on a podcast, you're not a plumber. You're not plumbing on the podcast, right? You're just on a podcast. I
didn't say I was plumbing on the podcast, but I'm still a plumber. Like you snatch back my credentials just because I'm not in front of a toilet?
It doesn't go. This is what I stress to everybody. You shouldn't go that deep to your core. It's a job.
It's not that deep to my core. I'm saying that's just.
You're not always an academic. That's my point. Academic is a job. If you're not doing plumbing, you're not a plumber at that point. You're just a person. If you're not doing academia, you're not an academic at that point.
Okay, so then clearly to you, while we could be, or let me make sure I understand. So in your view, we could be embodying the values of the Black radical tradition, but that is not public scholarship, or is it?
No, so I would say the Black intellectual tradition, just so I'm not misquoted here. But the idea of why are we doing the podcast? Because we don't have to do it. It's not in our job. I don't get paid. I don't make no money off it, and I don't have to do it for my job, right? So the whole point of it is we want to have conversations with, and this is the difference with the idea of public sociology. I'm not doing the podcast to take sociology to the people. I would never do that. This is saying, look, we want to have conversations about Blackness, push the debate forward. That's always been part of what Black political tradition, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, has been. It's about, we're going to have spaces to have this education. It's education. That's what we're doing, right? The whole point of it is education. And that has been a massive part of Black radical tradition. Sure. So when we do that, we are doing it. But that's not as an academic. For me, that's so separate from being an academic. They're two different things.
And absolutely, I agree with you that it's separate from being an academic in that sense, because I did it before I was an academic. Exactly. Right? I was a podcaster before you told me today that I was an academic. And so that is different, but I do feel a different way about how I share the messaging or the things I say, or maybe the ideas I have access to. They're just different because I'm accessing and being exposed to different things, like naturally, right? Like because I'm reading all the greats.
They're not great. But that's my point, though. It will change you the ways you won't that aren't good.
I'm making a joke here. Like
no, but it's serious though. But it's true though. Like. So when I wrote New Age of Empire, there's a whole bit in it about Enlightenment thinkers. And by the way, Marx, Enlightenment thinker, which means he was a white racist. Anyway, whatever.
The views expressed by Kehinde Andrews are not those of Erika Brown. I would like to thank the Jane Nelson Institute for Women's Leadership at Texas Women's University for their support of my work and research.
Wow. But yeah, having said that caveat, and there's this whole bit I had in the book about Kant, Immanuel Kant. Anyway, so and before I wrote the book, I would have said you should keep Immanuel Kant and you can just teach around him. Actually, having read, like, Immanuel Kant is so important to university academics ideas, right? Which is somebody who actually had these dubious racial theories about us being inferior, and actually wrote advice to slave owners and how best to beat us, because he thought that we had too thick skin. So you shouldn't use a whip, you should use a split bamboo cane. This is Immanuel Kant, who's the father of human rights. Right? So before the book, I would have said, look, keep it all. Actually, having done the work, reading that stuff is damaging. You just need to burn him and get rid. You don't need it. Like, you honestly don't need it. And that's the problem with academia. You have to go through all these hoops and read all this stuff and learn about this and learn about that. And it actually changes your outlook on the world in a negative way. And that I think is the problem of trying to.
And to that point, that's been a really hard part of my academic journey, is making sure that I go behind the things that I'm learning and getting in class, right? To try to figure out, well, what's the real thing that's happening, right? What were other people doing at the same time? Because there are so many instances of, this is the founder of this idea or this topic. And then once you just like peel back a couple of layers, you're like, somebody else was doing that work better 2 decades before, blacker, you know what I mean? Like, and so that has been a really interesting thing that I did not expect to find, because it's like, this is supposed to be about knowledge, right? This is supposed to be about preserving knowledge, and should be about enlightenment.
That's not what it's about. That is not what it's about.
It's not, but I figured that out. I did figure that out.
This is good. Do it. And I said, I'm not saying don't do it. You should do it. Keep your critical head on. Read Malcolm. You'll be fine.
Okay, so I feel like as we come to the end of our time, I'm not sure that we've answered any of the questions, right? I'm not sure that we've come to any resolutions.
No, we did. I think first question was, the podcasts are in the Black Radical tradition. It's far harder to make that case for academic work, but maybe you want to make it, and I don't know. But and what was the second question? It was about public sociology.
Yes. What is it? How do we define it?
It's a myth. I say that right. That's a myth. It's nice. Sociology is not public, so you cannot make something not public. When we're doing our work in public, and I think our work is a good example of this. When we're doing our work in these public spaces, I would say it's not sociology. Simple as that. I am a trained sociologist. I have a PhD in sociology, but I would say it's not, that public work is actually not sociology. It's something very, very different.
Well, I'll say this. I will say that I will endeavor to prove you wrong.
Yes, don't do that. I'm probably wrong, and I still get paid by the university, so I'm still the slave preacher. Don't get it twisted.
You still get paid by the university you hate. Got it.
The university I hate. I won't name it because I might get fired.
You named it in your bio. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, Birmingham State University. The university I hate. Yeah. I might not be an academic anymore. Look at that. Free at last.
Okay.
Yep.
So, on that note, as we close out, Dr. Andrews.
Oh, please don't call me that. I mean, have this whole conversation. Call me Dr. Andrews.
You know I do that just to bother you.
Yes.
But I'm looking forward to the day that somebody calls me Dr. Brown. I'm waiting for the day for somebody to call me Dr. Brown.
I'll call you Dr. Brown.
What'd you say?
Dr. Brown. There you go. Podcast doctor.
For somebody to call me Dr. Brown and for it to be true. I am looking forward to that. I told my children they're going to have to call me Mommy Dr. Brown. Like, that's how much.
Are you going to change your passport? That's the question.
Can you change your passport to add that?
You can.
No.
The reason I haven't
Maybe in
changed
the UK you can. Maybe.
I'm sure you can in America. The reason I didn't change it is because I don't want them asking me for help in an emergency and me to sit there and go, I can't help you. Sorry.
You're black. They're not going to ask you for help.
Don't see Dr. Andrews. I'll be like, yeah, what man? Come on.
then nobody's gonna ask you for help.
Well,
See, now you made me forget what I was saying. I don't even know anymore. Okay.
yeah.
So,
As we come to a close, say.
what'd you say?
You're saying as we come to a close.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there anything that, like, what are your takeaways? We talked about a little bit of it, right? But is there something else that you want to know? Is there something else that you want to promote? Like what's happening during my fellow Taurus's birthday month in 2025? Like, talk to the people.
Yeah. Okay. So and Malcolm X is obviously Malcolm. 100th birthday would have been next year, May 19th, and so we are Harambee Organization of Black Unity are organizing the Convention for African People. So I said before, Malcolm left behind a blueprint, a platform that says, let's do this. No one's really picked it up. So we picked it up and said, let's organize. And so we're going to hold Convention for African People in Gambia. All the details are on Make It Plain, make-it-plain.org. And the idea will be any Black person around the world from the continent, really important to connect Africa to the diaspora. And we're going to try and build the global organization. So the idea is, after that convention, we'll have the image of the organization, Afro-American Unity, and we'll be able to go forward as a people, as a collective. And that is definitely not academic work. I can say that with a straight face. So we're all more than welcome.
Are you going to sponsor my trip? That's what I want to know. Are you going to sponsor the Brokish podcast?
You can podcast the live podcast at the convention. That'd be good, actually. If we got the money, this is all community. This is actually, the money for this came from my Malcolm X book. So I'm writing a Malcolm X book. I should promote that as well, as Malcolm is the most important intellectual of the 20th century. And so the book will just be Malcolm's.
Who is the most important intellectual of the 19th century or the 18th? Like, tell who.
I don't know. I just know 20th century, the 19th century.
Okay.
19. What was that? I don't know. You're asking the wrong person.
Okay. So the money from your Malcolm book is going to support.
Yeah, this is paid for the convention so far. If there's enough left over, we'll get you over there. Certainly. Why not? More than welcome. But there is going to be an academic element to it as well. Thinking about, because I had to pay for it, right? So the one thing I would always argue for is take money out of universities. Universities have money, take money out. So we are allowing people to submit academic papers. You have to pay a registration fee if you have an academic paper. Get a university to pay. Come along. But the convention will not be academic. It's not an academic conference. That's a band. 100% band. The whole point of it is to build the organization. And so one of the things we're calling out is we're going to have a Black United Front on Make It Plain, a directory of Black organizations around the world. So if you have a Black organization that you want to put on the directory, just email mip@blackunity.org.uk as well.
Okay, cool. And when is the call for papers coming?
It will be soon. It's almost done. So give us a couple of weeks. We also have sourced, there's 230 apartments in about 6 different apartment buildings that you can rent. So we wanted to keep the money in Gambia rather than give it to these terrible hotels. So in a couple of weeks, very, very shortly, there'll be registration will be up, accommodation will be up, call for papers for the academic will be up. And yeah, come to Gambia, May 17th to the 19th, 2025.
I love it. So we just, on behalf of Brokish and Make It Plain, we would like, what'd you say?
Don't forget the foundation. Don't forget the foundation. Think of the good white people right there.
When I get put out of school, I just want y'all to know it's because of this episode.
Esteemed professor, world-renowned professor, you can't get kicked out of this. Come on there.
I just want you to know that it is going to be because of this particular conversation. But it is what it is. It is what it is. So we would like to thank you all for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you in Gambia in 2025.
Yes, thank you.